A very good morning to everyone, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests, and passionate advocates for climate action. Welcome to day 6 of the Malaysian Support for the COP30 event, a 10-day virtual journey held in conjunction with the UN Climate Change Conference in Belém, Brazil. Over the next 4 days, we'll be exploring a variety of key climate themes that highlights how Malaysia is turning climate ambition into meaningful action. Additionally, you're welcome to visit our website to check out the daily themes. Today's theme is Stewardship and Leadership, Accountability Beyond Compliance, which highlights a deep dive into governance and stewardship as the backbone of sustainable transformation, highlighting both public and private leadership, and explores the role of board leadership and corporate stewardship at advancing net zero and sustainability governance. To kickstart our program, we begin with a conversation with Dr. Gary Theseira, Chair of the Council of the CGM, joined by Ms. Jackie Mah, President and CEO at the Institute of Corporate Directors Malaysia, known as ICDM. Today, their session, which is titled Stewardship and Leadership, Accountability Beyond Compliance, takes a deep dive into governance and leadership as the foundation of sustainable transformation, which highlights both the roles of public and private leaders. It explores how board leadership and corporate accountability can drive progress towards net zero and strengthen sustainability governance. Please join me in warmly welcoming Dr. Gary and Ms. Jackie as they share their insights and reflections to open our Day 6 conversation.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here again. Once again, we had a bit of a long week because, as you know, the COP in its first week runs into the Saturday and they only have Sunday off. But conversely, what's happening now is that we find ourselves here at Monday, and in fact, we just experienced Sunday in Belém, Brazil, and so there's no information coming out of the COP overnight. So don't worry, there's nothing wrong with your search engines or your browsers. If you're looking for the proceedings from yesterday, there are none to speak of. I must make you aware, though, that although there are no formal negotiations that occur during days off, like Sunday, that the day is normally used by coalitions to take stock of where they stand currently in the negotiations, as well as to strategize for how to handle the coming week. What happens usually is that the various thematic coordinators bring back the reports of the agenda items that they're covering and assess the amount of progress or lack thereof, and then collectively each of these coalitions then, based on their particular priorities, decides how to move this discussions forward in the coming half week or so, which is run by ministers and known as the high-level segment. So in some cases, specific ministers agree to run with specific agenda items, issues or themes, and that's how they plan the work moving forward. But there's actually a lot of coverage of the first week of the COP out there, and some of it coming from Thursday, between Friday and Saturday of the COP. Essentially, if we look at the coverage by Climate Network, which is an organization that reports on climate, they're actually saying that they see good things in the new or the second iteration or the new iteration of the Just Transition text. So they say that the new text is better anchored to the Paris Agreement, that it actually brings in social dialogue, meaningful participation, human rights, labor rights, integrity of ecosystems, and also biodiversity protection. They also see that the revised text has elements that include gender equality, empowerment of women, and finally intergenerational equity. Right. They do see also that the revised text covers the rights of indigenous peoples, the concept of free, prior, informed consent, and the specific rights and protections for indigenous peoples in voluntary isolation and initial contact. So, oftentimes these are the communities that are most often sidelined. We often point fingers at them and say, well, it's because you do not wish to collaborate or engage in discussions. But it is a fundamental right for some of these indigenous peoples, if they wish to voluntarily isolate themselves in their own environment, and in some cases attempt to avoid initial contact. Right. There was also a recognition that the new text does cover the role of workers, people of African descent, local communities, migrants, and this is, as I mentioned last week, a growing area of very, very grave concern, as more and more migrants appear to be losing their lives as they try to find parts of the world that they could actually have a livelihood. Also, persons with disabilities and persons in vulnerable situations. They also pointed out that the latest version of the Just Transition text does have some recognition that new and additional, as well as grant-based financing is needed, that this finance has to be highly concessional in nature and should not be debt-creating for countries. Also, the new text highlights the importance of locally led adaptation and social protection. And so that these just transition pathways can then be planned and reported using the NDCs, the National Adaptation Plans, as well as the LT-LEDs, or the Long-Term Low Emissions Development Strategies. The BELEM action mechanism, or the BAM. Now, I've heard it variously also described as the adaptation mechanism, but apparently it's the key outcome from the BELEM COP. They're still trying to nail down all of the key descriptors and functions, but right now they're talking about coordination, action and support, knowledge sharing, inclusivity, a seat for all, particularly observer constituencies, because oftentimes when the negotiations get particularly difficult, one of the first instincts of the negotiators and the presidency is to actually remove observers from the room. So the idea of this particular COP, given the promise of the Brazilian presidency to apply as much openness as possible, is actually to ensure that observers continue to gain access to even the most difficult negotiations. But still, I think that this is still limited to the formal negotiations. In many cases, informal negotiations do not, or there's no obligation to assure that observers have access to informal negotiations. Pretty much those are closed door sessions. There's concern that increasingly, even though the new version of the Just Transition makes reference to the kind of financing that's needed by developing countries, namely new, additional, non-debt creating, etc., that there is a sense or a trend that the financing of climate activities is moving into the realm of the multilateral development banks and the other non-public granting schemes, and indeed there are some views being stated that the Green Climate Fund is acting almost as if it wants to be a multilateral development bank, and looking forward to adaptation as the next private investment frontier, which could actually lead to further debt for developing countries. On the surface of it, blended financing looks very attractive because it draws from multiple sources. This is something that developed countries invariably push for, because rather than having direct provision of finance from developed to developing countries, developed countries always make the point that the funding to maximize impact should not discriminate and accept funding from various sources. But the problem is when you do have this kind of financing, even if it is in the form of blended financing, where you are bringing in both private and public, you still bring in the element of private financing that does need to generate returns for the investors, and would actually become part of the debt for developing countries that they need to repay. So there's some concern that to justify and to promote punitive unilateral measures, to condition finance to creating enabling environments for investment, etc. In other words, we're not going to provide the financing unless you, as the host developing country, provide the enabling environment, or you don't do things that might put you on a tariff list and the like. That all of these things might actually condition financial flows and even impede critical financial flows, and result in a departure from the 1.5 degree pathway. Also being discussed is this issue of green shipping, because the shipping sector is one. Of course, it's under the IMO, the International Maritime Organization, that looks at greenhouse gas emissions in international waters. But there was a net zero framework, a fairly groundbreaking decision that should have actually been a victory for climate action and multilateral cooperation. But unfortunately, agreement on this net zero framework has been very, very difficult, because obviously if we've been looking at the news, the US has stepped up their opposition. They've threatened to apply tariffs and other punishments to any country that supports any kind of net zero framework. And so unfortunately, this is one of the issues that has been one of the cans that's been kicked down the road to a further time. Right. Also concerned about, even as we move toward greater electrification, the recognition that the source of many of the transition minerals needed for the energy transition do come from developing countries. Things like components for solar wafers, battery cells, wind turbines, transmission lines, all of these require critical energy transition minerals, and these are primarily sourced from the global south. And so the UN Secretary General's panel on critical energy transition minerals that was established at COP29 was supposed to serve as a platform for honest and deep global debate on this issue. But unfortunately here at COP30, some of the momentum has stalled, but the work has since the issues that were to be discussed under this panel thankfully have sort of been moved over to the Just Transition Work Program, and that seems a logical fit. All right, you simply cannot talk about just transitions without confronting the key issues that surround it, things like governance, human rights, and economic justice. If you've seen pictures of how cobalt is mined in the Congo, for example, you will understand that many of these things are actually linked to communities that live in poverty, and in these situations where they are actually digging by hand some of these minerals out from the ground and then processing the minerals, purifying them, doing some initial purification. That there is a great deal of hardship involved in that. Not only that, there is exposure to the elements, and as we know, with the changing climate and increasing heat waves, outdoor work of this kind is very, very dangerous, and particularly when governance is poor and underaged and even children might be involved in some of these activities. Now we do see that countries like Burkina Faso and South Africa are pushing back. They are reminding the rest of the world that these minerals must be part of how the Global South transitions in a just way, through some level of industrialization, through some value addition, through economic diversification. And so trying to leapfrog the mistakes made by the past, or the development pathways of the countries that are now developed countries, and making sure that things like human rights, including worker, indigenous people's rights, these things are non-negotiable, recognizing that FPIC, or free prior informed consent, must be upheld, that community participation and protection must be ensured, that there are places that need to be protected, so-called ecological no-go zones. There should not be any loss of sovereign control over these things, and the idea perhaps that circularity cannot be reduced to a corporate slogan. Right? So the Just Transition Work Program can help close this gap in the energy transition, ensuring that parties include transition minerals in the text to ensure that future work explicitly addresses the role of minerals in delivering a fair, equitable, and development-aligned transition. So really, oftentimes we look for these opportunities, and here we have an opportunity to use the high demand for these minerals to help countries that are in dire need of development, still suffering from energy poverty, to actually retain a fair share of the products that they are extracting for the rest of the world to use, and to make sure that they themselves benefit. This is a repeating pattern seen in many developing countries. Even as they they transition their energy, there are oftentimes stakeholders that are called on to sacrifice, to contribute, but they themselves do not benefit. Also, we need to endorse the UN Secretary General's panel roadmap and commit to supporting its next phase of work. This is, of course, the work that was that actually were slowed down. But they also want to embed key panel principles from this UN Secretary General's panel into the Belém Action Mechanism for global just transition, so that communities, ecosystems, and local development can remain central. So the idea is that the success of COP30 should not be measured just by the declarations that come out of it, but more importantly by the processes from now moving forward, the processes that it sets in motion to prevent extractive patterns, to make sure that the holes that are left by all of this mining for these minerals is filled with justice, rights and development for the countries that are going to help the rest of the world meet their clean energy supplies in the future. Finally, and I recognize that I'm running a little bit over time, but I do need to put this last one in because it's very, very important. The fact that current global militarism is indeed fueling the climate crisis. Up to 2.7 trillion US dollars was spent on military activities in 2024, and this figure is on track to reach 6.6 trillion US dollars, 6.6 trillion US dollars by 2035. So not only is a great deal of resources being used for military activities, the military activities themselves produce a huge amount of emissions. And yet, the fact is that most countries are not required to report military emissions to the UNFCCC. And it's not a small amount, but 5.5% of total global emissions actually are from military activities. Now, there's been a small group, Colombia, Cuba, Mexico, Latvia, all of these things have connected fossil fuel dependencies to militarism, and they're calling for greater ambition to include military emissions in the updated NDCs before the next COP31. They're also calling for reallocation of military budgets, and they should redirect these to close the climate finance gaps. And then in a very interesting move, they are calling for integration of peace and justice, recognizing that true climate justice cannot coexist with war and structural violence. All right, so all of these things, of course, would be things that are relevant to the 1.5 degree goal and to, as it were, international justice, and so there's a move to link this to the advisory opinion that was put out by the ICJ earlier this year. The three key outcomes, meaning that 1.5 degrees centigrade is the legal limit, as opposed to the 2 degree target. Half a degree does matter, that states must provide resources at the scale that loss and damage requires, and that where causation can be established, frontline communities do have the right to full reparation. All right, so tomorrow we'll have the updates from the opening second week of the COP, as they open on Monday, which is actually it's only still Sunday night there. So on Tuesday we'll bring you the updates from the opening as they reopen on Monday morning. Right now, however, we are very, very thrilled and very privileged to have with us Ms. Jackie Mah of the Institute of Corporate Directors Malaysia. She's their current CEO and president, if I'm not getting that wrong. Jackie, it's a pleasure to have you on this morning session at CGM's parallel coverage of the COP. And we really value your views on the role of corporate boards, particularly in the ideas of sustainability and stewardship. Now, you helm ICDM, which has a mandate to professionalize directorship and to promote excellence in corporate governance in Malaysia. In your view, why have stewardship and sustainability emerged as kind of new essential competencies for directors? And why are they important now and into the future?
Hi, Gary. Thanks for having me. I think before I start, I'd like to congratulate CGM and yourself, for having covered, the activities that has happened over the past week. Like your recap, it seems like lots of things are happening, and hopefully the next week of conversations will bring fruit, to a lot of these actions that we have to take. Before I sort of start talking about ICDM, I also wanted to go back to what Arin said about, the subject of today and the theme, which is beyond compliance, public and private sectors. And this is really at the helm of what we do. Now, when I was listening to a lot of the developments at COP30 in the past 7 days, and I think one of the things that struck me was the fact that we do have quite a significant gap when it comes to NDCs, right? The ambition gaps. It was astonishing to see that, with the over 100 companies that have already submitted the NDCs, it only accounts for maybe about 14% of the additional emissions reductions that are needed by 2035 to, narrow the gap. And I think one of the things that struck was that how can boards, corporate boards, take this action and help, to drive through things? We spoke about momentum, and we spoke about how they can actually help to execute these goals. Now, at ICDM, I think what's really important is we are set up to professionalize directorship, as you rightly say so. And really, there are two core pillars that we look at. I mean, of course, the rest are like advocacy, but really the two core areas we see that's very important is education, as well as pipeline building. And they both have to exist together, as we educate. It is very important to make sure that the next generation of pipelines will continue the stewardship that is required for that profession. Mm-hmm. Now, someone asked me a question about what modern boards are like. And if you look at modern boards now, it's no longer about oversight. People talk about board oversight all the time. But, increasingly we find that boards need to have insights and, most importantly, foresight, right? And so you're no longer looking at protecting the value of the organization, but you actually have to value create. I mean, it's such a big word. It's so difficult to carry out. It's so difficult to demystify. But how we are advocating at ICDM is really we are proposing that boards needs to be stewards of organization. They cannot wait. It's no longer a waiting game thing. They are entrusted to look after the people, the purpose, and the future of that organization. So in many sense, they are making decisions not just for today's shareholders, but they are actually looking at tomorrow's stakeholders and decision making that will impact what tomorrow will be like. Yeah. And so when I talked about education earlier, it's really the need to just not educate, but shift that mindset, skill sets, and culture, so that we can transition this really important conversation on sustainability from risk to resilience, right? And so when I started the conversation about NDCs and so forth, how do boards play a role in this? And you've mentioned, the second iteration of just transition. And really what we find is that three key shifts that corporate boards maybe need to look at, to help these goals that we are trying to sort of develop at COP30 is number one is, I guess, to strengthen the climate governance and board oversight. So that's something that we will talk about throughout this session. Of course, the second is really to accelerate decarbonization from where it is now. And also to mobilize climate finance. You mentioned about developed countries, but corporates also play a very important role on that. So maybe if I can just touch a little bit on education and then we can move on in the conversation. I'd like to maybe share here today is we at ICDM run the BROSA Mandatory Accreditation Program Part 2 called Leading for Impact. It's a pure onboarding sustainability program. It's a 2-day program. But what I wanted to share is really the feedback that we've received after onboarding around close to 6,000 directors in the past 2 years. And what really struck me as a result of the program that we've conducted, I think the key takeaways that really struck me, when we asked for feedback, and this really comes out from directors of all levels, as well as across large, mid, and small cap companies, is they felt they had better understanding of their roles and responsibility. It's really brought out in light the fiduciary duties of directors in relation to sustainability oversight. And we in one of the modules that we share, we talk about the legal duties of directors, incorporating how they integrate sustainability within the organization, how they oversee climate risk. And then you move on to talk about, climate litigations that have not happened in Malaysia, but all around the world. And then everybody just wakes up, it's the first module of the morning. But what it really has brought in is really that understanding and alertness and awareness about, oh, this is now my duty. And then many other views that I hear, which is really good, is they now understand the need to integrate sustainability considerations into the business, into the strategy of the organization, the need to look at the rising and expectations stakeholder ecosystem, and as well as, most importantly, the oversight structure. So I feel a lot of this has really created awareness across boards. But I guess what's really needs to be accelerated is really the practices, the sharing of experience, and the actual application and execution of this on the ground. So I want to stop here. I want to give you a little bit of chance to ask follow-ups in case I ramble a little bit too much. But I think what I feel from the work that we do, we're starting to see that level of awareness rise. I think there's a call for more support in terms of execution and implementation. And now we've got things like where boards need to be aware of the goals that they're setting so that they're realistic and not just an ambition.
Yeah, no, I think you make some excellent points here. This I like the imagery of moving from just oversight to actually having insight. These are so in line with the IFRS S1 and S2 when you talk about moving from reporting under the TCFD to actually understanding, and then also the need for foresight because you're not just adapting to current conditions, you are, through your process of understanding how climate works, actually understanding that these are permanent changes that are happening and that you cannot simply make a temporary change and expect to be able to sort of drop back into the old ways of doing things, quote unquote, when the abnormal situation ceases or when this extreme event is over, because it's not going to be over. It's just going to continue in this direction. The fact that you talk about the boards themselves sort of being more aware and more sort of in touch with what's going on. How do you see boards strengthening their competence? What are they doing in terms of governance skills, organizational readiness? Are there any specific things in directions in which boards are moving, trends that you see to make sure that they can handle all of these emerging issues speedily, in a timely manner? And also, I think that there are cost elements involved as well, right? I mean, when you're a board member, can you help us with some of those things?
Yes, I think, of course, compliments to CGM, and that you've run a lot of programs that actually help boards, even sectorial focused ones, which we always support. But I think what we see now is that, as I said, there are a lot of awareness, and a lot of boards come to us understanding that they must evolve from this level of awareness to some degree of climate fluency. I remember when we started to look into sustainability, and I think a lot of boards came and said, "Oh, I need one director with sustainability expertise." You must know that. And after a little while, they realized that it is not one person that they need; they actually need the entire board. So even these conversations about board structure on how you oversee committee has really changed. It could have started off with people thinking, "I need just a sustainability committee or an officer, and I park everything there." But now you see collectively. So what we now realize is that, and when we work with boards, is that there is a need for continuous education for directors in many different forms. So we don't say that if somebody, attends LIP and then they're certified and they're qualified, they have a certification, they can move forward. I think boards understand that. And the good takeaway that we get now is that the entire board feels that they are responsible for continuous professional education in this space and in many different areas. And what they've also said is that they not only want that, but they would like their management to be aligned in terms of that education. So the answer to your question is really, we see that ecosystem of climate literacy training expanding from directors, to senior management, and the need for that alignment of knowledge. So very often you could see maybe management would be the one proposing a lot of ideas, boards are a little bit behind, but what has really changed now is you see companies looking at aligning both the board and management in terms of their literacy, so they speak the same lingo, so they understand one another. The other part is really, as I mentioned, it's not purely just about education, but when you talk about competence, it's also about refreshing your board composition. So when you have a few more and not just one member who is a sustainability savvy voice, it helps to elevate that conversation, which was previously not there. But it helps to bring that sustainability conversation into everything you discuss, not just on a roadmap or strategy, but on other areas like investments or governance and so forth. And of course, beyond training, there are many conversations. So we do a lot of peer dialogues, conversations, and advocacy programs at ICDM. And what we really hear is when directors come and ask questions, and at the end of the day, these scenario-based discussions actually creates a platform for directors to learn not with one another, but also from one another.
From another,
yeah. So the most evident one is when we do what we call the LIP alumni. So when you finish the LIP program, you get inserted into an alumni network. And that's really useful because that's when we get subject matter experts and companies to come and share about the practices that has worked, challenges that they have faced. And like you said, you mentioned about finance as well, because there's still a lot of misconception out there that sustainability is costly. It's all about money, right? And so when a company actually comes and share the fact that it can bring long-term sustainability to the organization, it helps to give that perspectives to the smaller companies that they can do what they are able to do, but still gain value from that. So I think it's not just about looking at training, but I think it's looking holistically at a really comprehensive peer learning, but also getting people in the room to understand. And I just want to close with the fact that and we are starting to move nationwide. We've gone to states like Sarawak, Johor, Penang, and many more next year. And the idea is that we understand that private initiative is important, but the public sector, bringing along the public sector, GLCs, state-owned enterprises are equally as important. So with the sustainability education that we're carrying out, we are also hoping to bring that both public and private sector together so that there could be partnerships that they can then learn from one another, so that the policymakers can get some insights into the industry and the businesses can get better clarity on perhaps future regulatory expectations.
Completely agree about what you said when you talked about not having this one sustainability star, as it were, in your board, and not even stopping at having a small sustainability committee, and many times you might not even have a sustainability committee. You might have a risk committee or a compliance committee or an audit committee that's serving this purpose as well. But if you look at the composition of most boards, you will find that a lot of particularly with family companies with rich family history, sometimes you find that it's extended family members and in-laws and things like that, and you sort of wonder, how well versed is everyone. If I, as maybe an independent board member, talking about maybe heading a sustainability committee, how am I going to sell these ideas to the other board members in a way that they can understand, wrap their minds around, and just come back with informed decisions? And you're right, it has to be good, either it has to be actually integrated with what the C-suite is doing. It can't be unidirectional. It has to be bidirectional. But nowadays, if you have policies and they go down the chain, you might even have senior engineers or managers who will just send the message back up and say, no, it can't be done. And that can actually stop. Engineers sometimes don't realize how much power they have. But you're also correct in highlighting the fact that it has to move out of the corporation and even into the supply chain. Because when it comes to these concepts of sustainability, when it comes to social impacts, human rights, etc., it's so easy to get your product or service tarnished by something happening, half a world away, somewhere where your feedstock is maybe being mined, or where your ingredients are being grown and harvested, and all it takes is one video to go viral, and all of a sudden, everyone is doing damage control and running around, and the entire focus kind of gets lost. But you talked about the LIP as one of the tools, or one of the programs, maybe that's the correct word, that ICDM does. What are some of the other strategies that you might have to keep, you talked about having this pipeline management, to keep this pipeline of more and more informed young directors coming into the picture?
No, I think, yes, that's right. The pipeline is really the other bit of important work that we do. I think ever since ICDM was set up 7 years ago, we really, one of the things we aim to do is really to be more intentional in filling this whole board readiness gap. And I think with the standard governance programs that we offer, in the sense that we make sure that they understand their duties, responsibilities, their oversight, and their knowledge on governance, right? But the other part of it is what we're trying to instill is that the whole board readiness gaps is also about the mindset, about the stewardship role that they play, right? So at the beginning, when I spoke about, it's not just an oversight, you have to understand. And so when you think long term, you would embed long-term value into every decision you make, everything you do, whether it is when you're setting up a board composition, when you're running a project, when you're putting up strategies, you always think long-term. And so that's the education that we try and build within the next generation of directors. So the future board education to build this pipeline really looks at very forward-looking and specialized ones. So it's not about just teaching directors to be compliant, but it really moves to talk about ESG, digital transformation, and AI is really coming into that. And so similarly, like sustainability, a lot of boards are finding that I can't just get that one AI expert on the table. Every one of us needs to know, because you need to understand the risk that you are exposed to. So what we're trying to do is now move from the core governance training to a more holistic education, looking at the different types of emerging areas that needs to be in. So we now have, when we talk about pipeline, we now have over 1,500 candidates in our directors registry. 10% of them are what we deemed as board ready. The rest are existing directors. 40% of them are female. But what I really wanted to point out was that 5 out of 35 board positions that we have sourced for this year in 2025 were sustainability related. Yeah. It's not that high, but it shows that, of course, typically when you refresh a board, you may need to replace a finance person with a finance person. But it's good to see that companies are starting to put that as a criteria within the sourcing criteria. But only about 5% of these members so far have listed sustainability as their top 3 expertise. So that's not a lot. We're talking about 5% only. So as we continue to grow, we understand that we need to fill the board readiness gap for the new aspiring directors, but at the same time, with existing directors, we have to continue to advocate capacity building in them. So you see, when I spoke about education and so forth, I think it's very easy for directors to understand and be aware that they need to know about sustainability, and what they do about it is, so it's a gap between saying and doing, right?
Yeah.
So a recent survey, I think I saw last year in PwC, a corporate directors survey, it talks about 75% of Malaysian directors understanding that Gen AI is important. Right? But at the end of it, only 4% feel they have the sufficient skills to oversee. And this was just a year ago. And look at how AI has evolved. So I think what we need to do is, as we build pipeline, is to really focus on closing that gap between knowing I have to do it and actually doing it. So education coupled with practical experience sharing and peer-to-peer sharing amongst companies are very important.
Yeah. In that vein, the Securities Commission has been very progressive about putting out not only regulations but also resources to try to help corporate entities and boards to gain a more rounded understanding about the needs for sustainability and climate resilience, and they've even come up with some templates and tools to do this. Just your statement about knowing that this is out there, and knowing how to actually bring it in, integrate it, and then populate these templates, spreadsheets, maybe apps, with your own corporate information. Trying to identify areas where there's uncertainty, trying to plug areas where there's no data. What is ICDM's approach to kind of making sure that boards know how to use all these tools that are out there? I mean, some of them are not cheap. You have to pay for them, Yes. So it's one thing to have a board decision that just says, we need something like this. Just spend the money and buy it. And then when you get the thing in, nobody knows how to actually fill it out properly. Is ICDM doing anything in that area?
It's a bit like when we go out and buy gadgets, right? And we get very excited about gadgets, and when we have them, we actually do not know how to use a sophisticated camera, for that example. No, actually, you're rightly so. There are a lot of tools out there, and every time we hold a dialogue, and for many years we've done that, we still feel people getting really amused by a very simple platform. Now, because there are a lot of resources and tools out there, we find that what we at ICDM should be doing really is to expose them to these tools, expose the boards to the availability of these tools and what it can bring to them. So I just want to cover the fact that our role is really to create that awareness, that mindset that boards needs to be stewards, and how do they do this, right? And so one of the things we do is an evaluation, a board evaluation. And so when I say we are the bridge between the company and the tools available, so in our board evaluation, years ago, we have incorporated a dedicated parameter on sustainability oversight. And as we grew over the years, we've expanded the questions to cover questions like, does the board have enough conversations, at the board level or committee level? Does it appear in an agenda? Does the board discuss about risk and opportunities of sustainability? Is there a KPI embedded? So a lot of these questions and maybe even usage of tools, we pose to the board. And what we really see, and this one you might expect already, it is usually the lowest rating parameter amongst the entire evaluation. So you typically look at about 10 parameters covering leadership, composition, governance, board management meeting. And still up to today, the sustainability parameter is one of the lowest rating. And management scores are usually lower than the board. So we do a 360 where board and management will both score, and management will usually rate themselves much lower because they feel a lot more can be done in this space. So I think what we have done is really expose and bring to light where the gaps are, whether are you having that conversation on the board or are you not looking at the risk part. And so we raise this, and then we introduce platforms and we help link them to platforms to help. Because let's not forget, different companies have got different sustainability journey and maturity. And what we don't want to do is to go with a one-size-fits-all and say, this is what you have, right? And what you really want to do is to help them at whatever level they're at. So what we have seen in the improvements and recommendations we've made in terms of best practice as a result of this evaluation is the quality of discussions. Maybe when we recommend that it needs to have presence at a permanent agenda, you'd be surprised that not many board meetings have got sustainability as a permanent agenda for the smaller companies, for example. Or we could recommend development for directors. We even sort of guide them how they evaluate external advisors, because I think you would notice that there's a lot of conversations about over-reliance on external advisors at the moment. And of course, the last bit is really about accountability. Now, what is measured usually gets done. And so in the sense that it's important to also account that responsibility to a dedicated committee or a committee that is existing but is incorporated within the terms of reference. So you've mentioned not every company has got a sustainability committee. But the agenda needs to sit within one committee at the organization, how big, how small it is, so that it gets the attention it needs to and it doesn't get lost in transition. And for the more mature boards, we've seen that there's a lot more integration amongst committees. And so what we've seen in some of the really good practices are the fact that they have different committee members sitting at different meetings so that they understand, because sustainability conversations cuts across audit, risk, and other committees. And so you find that when you have that integration and embedded conversations across, it's more effective. And when you're talking about capital allocation and so forth and linking it to your commitments, there is more synergy and sync between both.
Yeah, you would think that should be almost intuitive. The fact that a compliance committee or an audit committee needs to actually understand if the risk committee wants to manage a particular area of emerging risk. You've already gone into a little bit of a discussion on some of the challenges that boards face that you've observed. And I don't want to slow you down there, but just a bit of a reminder that we are currently at, I think, almost 6 minutes till the top of the hour. When you're dealing with these kinds of challenges, as you advise boards, how do you raise the issue of short-termism? Because this is something that many boards struggle with. I mean, the first thing they look at is the financials, and then they look at the projections, for whatever it is, sales or turnover or profits moving forward. and they already begin to think in very short-term patterns, like, oh, we need to fix this. What's wrong?
Yes.
How do you help them to bridge this idea to get to slightly more long-term, more sustainable priorities for the corporation and even for their sector? How do you raise the need maybe to look at investing in newer technologies? Once again, you've talked about the idea of this sort of prevailing nagging thing in their mind that it's always going to be a cost center rather than a revenue generator. How do you handle that?
Yeah, and you're right to say that, when you're starting a meeting, you're talking about short-term pressures, and the moment finance comes in and everybody just shuts down. And by the time you reach that conversation on long-term, it's already like 6-7 hours into the day and everybody's ready to go home. So that's not a very strategic way to do that. So when we talk about short-term and long-term, I mean, this is a long-standing problem that, some boards would face. And what we feel is important is really, I think, two things. It's really maybe looking at, from a board perspective, agenda and metrics. Now, why I say agenda is because when you run meetings, you structure your agendas, you understand what's important, and normally we advise boards to put the most important thing right at the beginning of the agenda. But I think agenda planning is important because you can also ensure that the agenda items cover both short-term and long-term considerations. So you are being very deliberate and intentional about the conversations you want to cover. And we always advise that the COSEC must work with the chair or the committee chair to structure that agenda, as I said, so that both short-term and long-term considerations are there. And we always tell management in the sense that, if you make your paper very operational, then the whole conversation is just going to be operational. So it goes both ways, yeah. And of course, the other thing about metrics is about sending the message of what measured in a way, and if it's successful, it gets rewarded, right? And so you see a lot of conversations about embedding ESG performance metrics. I think some boards are still struggling, but that's really the way to make the entire organization understand that if you reward short-term behavior, then that's what the culture is going to be. But if you reward long-term behavior and long-term thinking, then that sends a message to the entire organization. So I guess at the end of the day, it's really about having that combination of agenda, being intentional, and also that monitoring part that's important. So things like employee engagement matrix, stakeholder engagement, and so on can all be measured and can all be monitored with performance.
Those are some amazing insights. Thank you so much. I'd like to just round off with this idea of Malaysia actually being a hotbed of talent, and perhaps the potential source for startups. I mean, we've recently seen a sort of new renewable energy idea come out of Singapore. Just a very simple idea of because water being polar, separating the negative and positive charges of literally moving water, and that hit the scientific and the business community in a big way. Of course, it's still very, very nascent, but it's something that nobody has been able to solve until now. So Malaysia has its share of startups, and as you move in maturity to being sort of IPO ready, maybe you could let us know what are some of the critical areas of sustainability that they might leave behind in their push for getting that IPO. What are these areas that they should consider if they believe they are IPO ready?
Yeah, last year there was 55 IPOs that went to the market, and this year Bursa is targeting for 60. There's a lot of companies getting into the system, and that's why we found it's something that is very dear to us, because I think whilst we are helping current boards to empower themselves, but I think we must not neglect the new companies and new boards that are coming, and really some areas that I think and from our conversation with some directors who are involved with this IPO journey, journey is how important it is, because as you list, you have to immediately be responsible for sustainability reporting. So we want to inculcate this culture early. So we want IPO companies to build sustainability into their existing narrative, have the right structure to oversee sustainability, whether it's in terms of committees, but also be aware of the kind of composition and directors that you need. So you've mentioned about, family business and founder-owned companies and so forth, and really try to emphasize how important it is to get the right expertise to come in with sustainability early enough so that you can map your initial strategy. And of course, the most important thing is we want to start that whole materiality assessment exercise early, right? And so if we start the company from day one, from kindergarten stage, so when they get to ultimate stage and they list, then they already have their priorities and KPIs. And of course, we're a strong believer that it's important to embed sustainability considerations into capital allocation, right? Whether it's for decarbonization, capacity building, innovation, or even adaptation. And so when you build a lot of these things early enough, you then have less problems and challenges to deal with when they eventually enter the market.
Excellent. These are just wonderful insights. I'd like to thank you so much, Jackie, for joining us this morning. I think our listeners have benefited a great deal from what you have shared with us, and we're really happy to be able to bring them all of these insights, and I think give some pointers to understand what you do at ICDM and how you are actually being very helpful to the corporate world and specifically to boards and directors as they navigate this minefield that is now ESG and sustainability and climate impacts, risks as well as opportunities, with the idea really that ultimately their fiduciary role is key in stewarding not just the corporation, but this whole ecosystem of supply chain, maybe SMEs and things like that in the future that need to be part of all of this. So on behalf of Climate Governance Malaysia, thank you from the bottom of our hearts. You've also been very complimentary of us. I think I counted twice. But thank you so much for your kind words, and it's always a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gary. If I can just leave the audience with just one liner, is I think at the end of the day, as stewards of governance, you cannot delegate understanding, nor you cannot outsource your accountability as well. So ultimately, it is really a board director's role to ensure that how we deliberately act onto embedding sustainability into every decision or disclosure and also dialogue that we make. So I thought I'll close with that. But thank you very much, and also compliments to Datin Sunita for carrying CGM all this while. And we at ICDM appreciate that effort, and may we continuously build boards for tomorrow.
Yes, thank you very much. Very, very well said.
Thank you. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you so much. Let me pass it back to Aryan.
So a very heartfelt thank you to the both of you for the insightful discussion and for the very interesting and informative perspectives that were shared. So now moving on, we would like to move on to the next section, which is known as the C-Suite Highlight, which will also be moderated by Dr. Gary, who's the chair of the council of this CGM, for those that are just joining in, and together with our next speaker, who is Mr. Stefano Clini, Managing Director of Carlsberg, Malaysia. The floor is yours for the both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Aryan. A very, very good morning, ladies and gentlemen, once again. And Stefano, it's a joy to have you on our CEO segment. You are, of course, the CEO of Carlsberg, Malaysia. It's a company that many Malaysians are familiar with. You have a great deal of visibility. As a matter of fact, people often talk about Malaysia as being a country that's a little bit food crazy, but every time you enjoy good food, it's almost invariable that you find yourself craving a good beverage to go along with all of the good food. So a very, very warm welcome, Stefano, to this program. And as you know, in our earlier discussion, we talked about the fact that double materiality is a big thing for corporates that are involved in producing a product, but that rely on natural resources, continuous supply of these natural resources to produce this product. Would you be willing to give us an introductory, maybe 101 on what's important for Carlsberg Malaysia, and how you navigate this need to produce a quality product that at the same time meets the growing concerns about sustainability?
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Dr. Gary, for having me, and Datin Sri Sunita for inviting me. And it's a pleasure to be here to speak to the audience today. And a double pleasure because the discussion and the chat should be about leadership and sustainability.
Yeah.
They're both subjects that are very close to my heart, and also subjects that are deeply intertwined, I think. And I was just listening to what you were chatting with Jackie before. Very interesting chat, by the way, and very inspiring. And there is lots of governance and compliance requirements, more and more so when it comes to sustainability in Malaysia. I think more than in many other countries in Asia, and that's something we should be proud of. And so most companies are engaged and are grappling with how do we best go about it. The question I'd like to pose to the audience and like to maybe expand a little bit on, Gary, is are we going about sustainability because we want to check a box, which we have to check? There's many boxes we have to check. That's a given, right? And it should be like that. Or because we are trying to deliver real impact. And there's a huge difference between the two. And maybe I can share a few thoughts.
Please do.
I think we should go about sustainability to deliver impact. And delivering impact is a leadership act. It's about how the top sets the tone. Now, what does it mean for us in Carlsberg, Malaysia? I think in Carlsberg, the top sets the tone. And when I mean the top, I talk to the very top, about the very top, all the way across space and time. Okay? I'm not talking about going back to the future of science fiction movie, but I'm talking about real history too. Back to space, because it goes back to the very top of our company in Copenhagen, and back to time, because I want to talk about the spirit of the founder. This company was founded almost 200 years ago by Jesse Jacobson. The man was dedicated his life and his life's work to improving the world we work in. Right from the start, he created the Carlsberg Laboratories. Carlsberg Laboratories are where the pH scale was invented. Carlsberg Laboratories is where we isolated for the first time in a lab yeast. And the first thing he did was to share the discovery with all the brewers across the world, including a small brewer in Germany that was called Heineken, that over 200 years has become our most fierce global competitor, using that discovery that Jesse shared 200 years ago. And we are proud of that, by the way. We don't resent it. We don't regret it. Because it's about contributing to a better world in any way we can. Also, what Jesse did, he created the Carlsberg Foundation, to which he left his shares. The Carlsberg Foundation today owns the biggest part of Carlsberg shares, and all the profits go to arts and science. And that makes us very proud, knowing that we're owned by a foundation which is dedicated to the betterment of the world we live in. So I'm getting closer to the subject.
No, you're very much on leadership now, and you very correctly point out that the way to be moving in the right direction now is to sort of have had an understanding of what the correct direction was to move from the very beginning.
Yeah.
So I think
We cannot run away from our history, and we are proud of ours. But today, the spirit of the founder is reflected in our purpose, which is brewing for a better today and a better tomorrow. And here today, we're going to mainly be talking about brewing for a better tomorrow. We were talking with Jackie about short-term, long-term, and like to think that when we talk about sustainability, we have to have a long-term focus.
Yep.
The brewing for a better tomorrow is translated in our global sustainability strategy, which is called Together Towards Zero and Beyond. There is 6 zeros: zero carbon footprint, zero farming footprint, zero packaging waste, zero water waste, zero responsible drinking, and zero accident culture. All of these underpinned by some very critical factors. There is a few, but a couple I want to mention is D&I and human rights. That is our global strategy. So we came back closer on time. Let's come back closer on space. How does this translate in what we're doing in Carlsberg, Malaysia? Well, first of all, we have a view that our role is to be thought leaders in ESG in Malaysia. That is so important that is embedded in our, we call it strategy grid, which is the tool we use to deploy our strategies every year. There is only 9 of those, and one is to be a thought leader in ESG in Malaysia. I think on top of being true to our corporate mission and purpose, we have an added responsibility as a multinational company operating in Malaysia. I think any multinational company that operates in a country, in Malaysia in this case, we are guests here. Yeah? We are invited guests, and we have to pay back having a responsibility to improve the business environment we operate in. One way we do it, of course, is by creating economic value, paying salaries, paying dividends, and so on and so forth, creating jobs, but also by just improving the business practices and the way we do business. By embedding our mission of becoming a thought leader, the first choice we made is that sustainability is everybody's job in Carlsberg, Malaysia. Yeah? And I'd like to refer to something you and Jackie were discussing before that I thought was very, very relevant, which is, we shouldn't have just one expert in the board that does sustainability. Because, of course, when I talk everybody, is every employee, but that include the board. Right? And I fully agree with what Jackie said. I think that having one expert working on sustainability in the board not only is not useful, but is damaging, because it creates a perception that sustainability is somebody else's job. Which is the biggest risk that we run through any corporation, whether it's in the board or is in the management structure. Okay, we have appointed somebody. That's their job. We have to take the box. Let's move on and talk about what promo discount I need to give tomorrow to win.
Box ticked. Box ticked.
We use a totally different approach in Carlsberg, Malaysia. And we have reversed the paradigm. We are taking the responsibility to train and coach our board on sustainability. They see that everything we do, we live and breathe sustainability. That puts positive pressure on the board that they need to up their game. They can lead. Yeah, positive pressure because it is positive, and actually they are extremely engaged and happy about that. Let me give you an example. Just no more than a couple of weeks ago, we had a full day where we dedicated to sustainability, where we trained and educated the top 60 leaders of the company on anything about governance, compliance, IFRS, S1, S2, in very simple layman terms that everybody can understand, because that's very, very important, because such an alphabet soup when it comes to sustainability that people get very confused. Yeah? So our job as leaders is to really boil down to something very simple. Well, to that training, all of our board meeting members participated. And it wasn't mandatory. We didn't tell them, hey, you absolutely have to come. We just opened the invitation, saying, if you guys want to join. And of course they all joined. Yeah? And that was great, because they role modeled the right behavior. But also, it was a way to help them grow, so that we can all use the same language and have the same priorities. And then is everybody's responsibility also down toward from the board and is also embedded in everything we do. Before with Jackie, you were talking about, again, short-term versus long-term, and how will you do capital allocation. But historically, CapEx, as we call it, is decided and allocated based on financial KPIs. Back to your discussion before. We have changed the model a long time ago. Carlsberg, Malaysia, and Carlsberg globally, sorry, not only in Carlsberg, Malaysia. And there is really three sets of KPIs before any big capex is approved. One, of course, is the financial metrics, NPV, IRR, all that good stuff that we've been trained since we're at university to look at, right? The second, health and safety. So health and safety investments don't go through financial evaluation. Yeah.
Okay.
The third is environmental impact. And that makes the discussion much easier and productive, if you want. Because it's not an afterthought. Okay? We don't have to fight to approve an investment that is good for the environment, despite the financials are not good, because that was the discussion becomes tough, because we all have to deliver. It's just a KPI, which is the base of our investment decision. And I can give you a very practical example. As Dr. Gay, we talked about that we spent more than 200 million ringgit to transform our brewery. Mm-hmm. Two of our biggest investments were a filtration line and a canning line that once they're not fully operational, and that are yielding a 40% reduction in water consumption. Reduced water consumption was one of the criteria based on which the investment had been approved. Had I gone to the investment committee, which is a global level when you talk about hundreds of millions of dollars, after the local board is approved, there's not enough. You've got multiple layers of governance, as you would expect in a multinational. Had I gone there without investment that would not deliver an improvement in environmental impact, I would have been sent out of the door. Wouldn't even be up for discussion. So that is an example of how you can really embed sustainability in everything you do, including the decision that have a long-term impact. I hope that makes sense.
If I might interrupt, it must have been interesting. I'm trying to be a fly in the room when perhaps you were trying to raise this issue with the corporate head office back in Copenhagen, and trying to explain to them that here you run a plant in a part of the world that has the highest rainfall, and possibly the cheapest water around, and yet you want to put all this capex into reducing your own water consumption. Now, I mean, being a Malaysian, of course, I look at this and I go, this is one of the most impactful and altruistic sorts of actions that any corporate entity could think about, because we know now that the water situation, despite being in periods of as it were feast and famine when it comes to water supply, trying to live between floods and dry periods. But how did you go about trying to explain to the head office that, look, even though it rains so much and water is so cheap, I still want money and I want to invest it in reducing my water consumption by 40%.
That's a great question, Gary. And actually, you would have been surprised. That's the power of a shared purpose and a line of sight. There was absolutely no discussion. Okay? It was expected. Because it is about doing the right thing, having a meeting of minds that water scarcity is one of the most urgent issues we are facing globally. And we are not allowed to consider anything being an exception to that. It's about leaving a better planet for our children. It boils down to that. Okay, whatever we do, we have to brew for a better tomorrow. And what makes me proud that for us the purpose is not like it can be. It's something you work on a piece of paper, you forget about it. It's part of our daily discourse. Okay, we are discussing, guys, are we really brewing for a better tomorrow here? Yeah, and when you start a discussion with that, it becomes extremely easy. So yeah, it would have been fun to be fly on the wall because there was no discussion whatsoever. If any, we get challenged whether what we're doing is good enough.
Oh, okay, wow.
Yeah, so that's pretty impressive. And there is another example, if you allow me, Dr. Gray.
Oh, please, please. I was about to ask you, a better tomorrow means a better tomorrow across, sort of all living quality indicators and across, all of society. So I was just about to say, do you have any other examples that are as equally impressive? Yeah, please go ahead.
Well, I don't know whether they're impressive, but they're close to my heart, so I like to share it, because hopefully it can be some thought starters. And we mentioned a few things about the environment. I like to switch gears and talk about other elements of our ESG strategy. And the one which is so close to my heart is human rights. Yeah? Okay. Now, when it comes to our employees, I think we've got a very progressive, state-of-the-art approach in creating an environment where everybody can thrive. Okay, but when we talk about human rights, we in Carlsberg, Malaysia, as any corporate, we touch so many lives beyond that of our employees. Think about contractors that come and work in our brewery every day. Think about all these people that wear a Carlsberg badge that are out there replenishing our shelf, promoting our products. Now, of course, I'm going to go back to the check the box exercise. Since years, all of our contractor and supplier, they have to sign the supplier code of conduct. So that box is checked. But then this year we start asking ourselves, but are we really sure? Are we really sure none of our contractors, if there is foreign workers, hold the passports? Mm-hmm. Are we really sure the living conditions are up to the standard that ensure human dignity? Or even more simply, are we really sure, that they do overtime is within what is legally admitted and humanly acceptable? Because we cannot really control the overtime. Because some of these contractors spend a few hours here, then some are there, and we came to the conclusion that plausible deniability because they signed a piece of paper is not morally acceptable.
Oh,
yeah. So we engaged with one of the most reputable consultants out there, and we went through a very extensive human rights assessment. Yeah. We started with the top 30 contractors whose people spend most time working with us and for us. It took a few months to do that assessment. It was extremely insightful. Luckily, there was no glaring issue that would lead us to,
exposure,
like mark, or any supplier, but a lot of areas that can be improved. Yeah, and therefore we've decided, first of all, we're going to close all these gaps for them, with them, and also we need to embark on an educational journey, because sometimes these contractors are smaller companies and they're not even aware that something that things they have been doing for up to years are somehow they are not that right. They can be done better. So next month we are going to have our supplier day. This is something we've instituted in Carlsberg, Malaysia last year. Last year we focused on environmental impact and was very successful. We educated our suppliers about the environment. We had another 16 suppliers sign up to SEDEX, where they pledge, to commit to certain environmental impact goals, and they share the data, which is very important for the public to see. This year, the whole day is going to be dedicated to human rights. Yeah, well, we're going to share with them all the findings. We're going to educate them and have them pledge and work with us to close any gap, so that they can be better at their business too. So that really makes me proud.
I'm sorry, I missed the last part.
So that I'm saying so that they can close the gaps, and that is going to be good for the business too.
No, I was thinking, you actually make me want to work for Carlsberg. Do you have any openings on the factory floor? No, but it's amazing how we can even extend this to plausible deniability being inadequate or insufficient a standard when you are dealing with workers. I mean, I continue to be quite astounded every time I visit your plant, and just a shout out, thank you so much for hosting our interchamber event just at the end of last week. Very, very generous of you. And I thought that His Excellency, the EU Ambassador, had some wonderful, wonderful points to make in that.
He's a much better speaker than me.
But getting back to getting back to a bit of what we're talking about here. The idea that I just keep thinking to myself, if I ran my home the way you run your company, and by extension, if every Malaysian ran their corporation, their home, serviced their vehicles, had a safety, and sort of everything aligned the way that they're done, as you do them, we would have so many fewer accidents on the road. We would have, our vehicles running at greater efficiency. We would all be reducing our water consumption by 40%. I mean, it's such an amazing message for you to be able to put out, and as a corporation with international exposure operating here in Malaysia. I think it's wonderful. I wish we could spend more time talking about this, because I'm sure that you have a great deal more examples, but we do have just 5 minutes left or 4 minutes left. Unfortunately, time flies.
You're right.
Would you happen to have some parting thoughts that you believe would be, I think could actually be inspirational to other corporate leaders, and to heads of government, to local government heads. Wherever it is, whatever it is you do, it's not so much what you do; it's how you do what you do that's important. So, would you, help us out with some wisdom in this area?
Thanks, Dr. Gary, for the question. And I have two. How much time do we have?
Please. Oh, no, we weren't doing that.
But we started 1 minute late.
Oh, yeah?
I can steal 1 minute.
Jackie owes us two minutes. Okay.
But they were worth it. Thank you, Jackie. Okay, there is two. One is about the returns. We like to say there is returns on sustainability. And I would like to speak to that with one example, We at Carlsberg Malaysia, we are getting great returns on our sustainability culture in terms of employer branding. Today's new generations are dramatically in search of a purpose, more maybe than we were. Yeah? When we were young, we just wanted to have we're ambitious, we wanted to have a career. It's a different world out there, and I think it's a good change. We at Carlsberg regularly for the last few years get rated as the top employer of choice among university students, in the beverages and alcohol space. And I firmly believe that our commitment to sustainability and our strong purpose plays a critical role there. As it plays a critical role in us making Carlsberg Malaysia a great place to work, because there is no price tag you can put to the employee's pride of working for your company. So that's one parting thought. The last thought then is about leadership. I like to conclude as I started, Gary, And I strongly believe, and all my colleagues, where sometimes when I coach on leadership, know that the leaders need to think in terms of legacy. One day, all will be said and done, the curtains are going to come down. We're going to look back, and we're going to think, what have we left behind? What are we going to be remembered for? And let me be very clear. We will not be remembered for the numbers we deliver. Once Stefano Clini will be gone, nobody will remember because, when he was there, the profit grew 5% instead of 3%. 10 years from now, nobody will have a clue. We're going to be remembered for two things. One, the lives we touched, the people, what we did for the people that work around us. how we help them have a better quality of life, we help them progress on their career and become better leaders themselves. The second is what we've done for the world around us. So also selfish in a way, okay? One day the reckoning is gonna come and we all are gonna have to look back. And we want to have done something that we are proud of. And if we only focus on the numbers, when we do that, self-examination, we're not going to feel very good about ourselves. So I would like to conclude with a much general request, a wish for all of us listening today, choose to live a life that matters. And then sustainability is going to flow out of that easily. You won't worry about half of the soup, short-term, long-term, RFRS S1, S2, which is important because all flows from there naturally, and you'll be happy and you find that journey very worthy.
What else is there to say? If you're living for all the right reasons, then there's a high likelihood that you're making sure that nothing is going wrong. Stefano, it's been an absolute joy having you on our CEO section on leadership. Thank you so much for agreeing to us and for being a so stalwart partner for CGM all this time and moving forward. We always value your insights, and I think what you've left us with gives us a lot of food for thought moving forward. I hope it is reflected in the upcoming COP outcome at the end of the week. Thank you so much.
Have a great day, everybody.
Ciao. Yes, and back to you, Arun. Thank you.
So now we would like to move on to the next section of today's session, which is we will be introducing the NGO Pavillion by WWF. So today's keynote speaker from WWF-Malaysia would be Ms. Siti Zuraidah, Program Lead for the Peninsular Malaysia Terrestrial Conservation Program at WWF-Malaysia. Let us welcome Ms. Siti for the discussion.
Thank you, the host. Good day to everyone. My name is Siti Zuraidah and I'm from WWF-Malaysia. I would like to thank you for the honor of speaking today. I would like to start by saying it's particularly meaningful to be gathering virtually for this, and as we engage from Malaysia, it reminds us that tropical forest nations share a common responsibility to steward some of the planet's most irreplaceable natural assets and to govern them with integrity, transparency, and long-term vision. Today, I would like to speak about one such national assets, which is the Ulu Muda forest landscape, and why strengthening governance and stewardship there is essential for Malaysia's climate resilience, water security, and biodiversity future. So when we talk about stewardship, we speak of responsibility, a collective duty to safeguard what we've inherited so it can continue to sustain future generations. But stewardship cannot stand on its own. It must be supported by good governance. The systems, institutions, and standards that ensure decisions are grounded in science, implemented fairly, and held accountable. Governance determines whether forests are managed sustainably, whether communities are genuinely included, and whether policies are translated into real protection on the ground. In Southeast Asia, climate impacts are intensifying. Longer droughts, more severe floods, and rising stresses on water resources. And this is where governance is tested now. How we manage our forests today will determine the resilience of our societies tomorrow. Which brings me to Ulu Muda, a landscape that exemplifies both the challenges and possibilities of stewardship done right. So I would like to talk about one of the landscape that we've been working on for many, many years. So we've started working in this landscape as early as the year 2000. And for many Malaysians, actually, in the northern region, Ulu Muda is not just a forest, it is a lifeline. And unfortunately, for many Malaysians, Ulu Muda remains unknown, even to Kedahans. So it is a forested landscape encompassing about 160,000 hectares and sits in the northeast of Kedah. So it really borders, it sits next to Thailand. And Kedah is located in one of the northern states in Peninsular Malaysia. This forest complex is a primary water catchment supporting Kedah, Perlis, as well as Pulau Pinang. It supplies raw water to more than 4 million people, powering homes, industries, as well as agriculture. It's also very important for the communities that live adjacent to this forest, as it is a source of their livelihood, food, as well as culture. Ecologically, Ulu Muda is part of the Central Forest Spine Master Plan, a government plan that aims to restore and maintain ecological corridor across Peninsular Malaysia's most important forest landscapes. The master plan also includes identifying and restoring over 30 over ecological corridors, so that wildlife can move safely between these forest patches. So Ulu Muda is one of the forest complex that is aimed to be linked to the main range that sits in the middle of the Peninsular Malaysia. So Ulu Muda shelters critical species like the Asian elephants, the Malayan tape, Sunda pangolins, and it has all 10 hornbill species that you can find in Malaysia. The other landscape that would have it would be the Belum Temenggo forest complex. It stores a vast amount of carbon, regulates climate, and anchors ecological connectivity across the landscape. And finally, Ulu Muda is central to our food security. And because like many across Asia, we do love our rice. So Malaysia's biggest paddy fields are located in the state, Kedah, earning its nickname as the Rice Bowl of Malaysia, producing close to 40% of the country's rice production. And it is Ulu Muda's water that irrigates it. Protecting this forest means protecting the staple that feeds our nation. In short, Ulu Muda is the kind of natural infrastructure that countries around the world are now fighting to restore. Malaysia is fortunate we still have it, but stewardship means recognizing its value before it is lost and ensuring that governance structure protects it for good. In WWF-Malaysia, our work in Ulu Muda has always been guided by science, collaboration, and belief that durable conservation requires strong governance. So a few areas of focus that we've been doing in Ulu Muda includes science to policy support. We have conducted hydrological analysis, forest cover studies, and ecological assessment that helps inform state and federal government discussion. Science has been crucial in demonstrating the immense water value and ecosystem services provided by the Ulu Muda forest. Second, long-term landscape management. We work closely with the Kedah state government to strengthen protection status, improve land use planning, and support sustainable resource management that aligns with both local and national priorities. For instance, when we did camera trapping in one of the ecological corridors, our finding was used as a justification towards expanding the ecological corridor by about 5,000 hectares to kind of really ensuring the functionality of the ecological corridor. Without such information on the ground, it's really difficult to ensure that policy that are made, at that level are really can be implemented or really have successful conservation outcome. Thirdly, we work with community engagement, and they are essential partners in stewardship. They live the closest to the forest and they are dependent on the forest. Our program includes environmental education, livelihood support, and empowerment of local champions who can advocate for sustainable management. An example that we've been doing to date in the past couple of years is a community carnival. We call it Carnival Community Sayangi Ulu Muda, or KATSUM in short. And where we engage with villagers that are adjacent to this landscape, men, women, as well as children, and create a space to discuss and learn what Ulu Muda means to them and how we, WWF, can come in and contribute to this, to developing this capacity, and in whatever form. And a lot of time we would ensure that, this engagement happens early on and our interest also aligns with them, such that it's not something that we come in and impose on them, but something that we co-design together. And fourth, partnership and advocacy. So conservation is never a solo effect, nor can it be done isolated. We've collaborated with government agency, CSOs, academic institution, and private sector partners to build a shared understanding and drive a collective action. And finally, governance innovation. We promote tools such as protected area management effectiveness, such as the management effectiveness tracking tool, and is currently working to develop the water catchment management plan. All these kind of frameworks encourage transparency, equitable management, and independent evaluation. These standards can create a culture of accountability in protected and conserved areas across Malaysia, including such as in Ulu Muda. Together, this effort aims to strengthen the foundation for long-term resilient governance of the landscape. Thank you. So this is just to I'll pause just to kind of have the visuals to align what I was seeing earlier. So what you can see is a map of Peninsular Malaysia, and what outlines is the landscape that I've been talking about, Ulu Muda. It sits really next to Thailand in the northeast corner of Kedah. And the visual that was shown earlier, I think that shows a picture of one of the time when so those are actually the reservoir. So there are three major dams in this landscape, and at that particular point, the water level was really low. I think it went down to 7% of the reservoir's capacity. So usually our field biologists would be able to take a boat and go to our field, to go further into our field site. However, at that particular moment, he literally had to trek through the lake bed, to get to the designated area. So it shows that this landscape is really very much impacted by climate. And Kedah being part of the northern area is always been affected by more pronounced drought season, and therefore that combined with the value that it has for in terms of water security and food security, it really means that it creates such an importance for the resilience of this forest landscape. Perhaps the host can also continue with the slides before I can catch up with the text. Thank you so much. Yeah, this is just to show its significance for water catchment. And then moving on. So there are a number of villages that dotted around the landscape, such as this, Kampung Belantik. And if you move next, it shows, the dependency of the local community. On the left, you have, the tualang honey, which is one of the most prized, items that you can get. So the tualang tree is one of the trees that, the honeybees would go, the giant honeybees, because, it's slender, it's really hard to get, and, bears won't be able to climb because it's so high. And they are still harvesting this honey through traditional methods, and they are selling it in bottles like that. And so there's still communities that rely on the freshwater fishes in this landscape, and of course they go in to get herbs for their own medicinal use. If you go to the next slide. Yes, so in the northern landscape, this is one of the largest remaining tract of forest where you still have herds of elephants, such as what you see in this photo right now, and this is. It is quite opportunistic as well. I've been in this landscape for many years, and unfortunately, I've never seen them through my observation when I was there. But other friends colleagues have seen them directly. If you go next. These are among some of the wildlife you can capture. This is based on our camera trapping work that's being done within the landscape as well as further south, where it's linked to the other forest blocks, and there's a corridor that links these two. And so this was where our camera traps were located. And if you go further, just trying to show a reflection of the landscapes that we're working in. So this is to illustrate, just back one more, just to illustrate, the vastness of the paddy fields that you can find in Kedah, being the rice bowl of the country. And so the slide kind of stops there, and because I just wanted to illustrate what does this Ulu Muda landscape really holds, because it's really difficult to illustrate it without having those photos. But I'll continue with my my other points, which is, so over the past years we've developed, there are encouraging momentums. We've strengthened efforts at both the state and federal to recognize the strategic importance of Ulu Muda, not just for biodiversity, but water security and economics. So there's also progress in integrating Ulu Muda's value into the broader state and national policies, whether on water resources, climate adaptation, or forest conservation. And this work may not always be visible to the public, but they are essential building blocks for long-term change. Yet, with many landscape of high economic interests, governance challenges remains. So among them are, first, we do need clear, lasting legal protection for Ulu Muda Forest Complex. Its water value is too important to be left vulnerable for short-term pressures. And we're not talking about, this fortress protected area that locks everything in, but we're talking about, multi-use zones and how we can best utilize the benefits that state and national government needs, as well as the continued ecosystem services that we value, as well as the wildlife that thrives in this landscape. Secondly, financing must be secured for long-term stewardship, whether through nature-positive investments or water catchment programs, or innovative investment mechanism that rewards protection over extraction. Third, enforcement capacity requires continued strengthening, supported by technology, training, and inter-agency collaboration. I take note of the programs that's done by the various departments towards strengthening the enforcement of this landscape. It is a vast landscape. Our Malaysian forest requires a lot of boots on the ground, and that's something that we need to continually see over the years to ensure that encroachment and poaching issues are kept to the minimum. And fourth, transparency and accountability mechanism, such as routine monitoring, public reporting, independent evaluation. This must become the standard practice. This landscape has various, there's active logging taking place. There's also state parks that is adjacent to the reservoir. It's also important for the agency that is responsible for ensuring water to the paddy fields. So there are many players in this landscape, and therefore, all the mechanism needs to be in place to ensure that in the long term, we have a shared vision of what this landscape means to all of us, and to ensure that it continues to thrive and able to deliver, what we need from this landscape. Addressing this landscape is not addressing this gap is not about limiting development, but it's to ensure that development remains viable, for the next, 100 years and 200 years or so on. So stewardship belongs to all of us. Protecting Ulu Muda and other similar landscape is our collective responsibility. Policymakers must lead with science-based consistent policies that safeguard water and climate security. Businesses and investors can help by seeing forests as long-term natural capital, supporting water catchment protection and nature-based solution. And the public, the awareness, advocacy, and call for accountability are powerful drivers that can turn policy into real and lasting action. At its core, safeguarding Ulu Muda is about safeguarding the well-being of millions of people. It's about honoring the principle that forest is not just resource, but a responsibility. So in closing, stewardship of forests is one of the most defining responsibilities of our generation. Malaysia's contribution to global effort begins with landscape like Ulu Muda. So let us choose governance that is courageous and stewardship that is long-sighted, so that future generations that inherit forests such as Ulu Muda, that it's not a diminished resource, but a thriving legacy. With that, I thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you, Ms. Siti, for that very insightful presentation on the Ulu Muda forest. I'm sure all the attendees today would have learned a lot from this presentation. So now moving on, we'll be moving on to the next section, which is the Industry Pavilion by UNDP. So for this segment, we would like to welcome Ms. Nosrat Ravichandran, the Head of Nature, Climate and Energy at UNDP Malaysia, Singapore and Brunei Darussalam. Please let us welcome Ms. Nosrat and let her share her remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and good day to everyone. Thank you very much for inviting us to this session. Really like to appreciate Climate Governance Malaysia for convening this important session on a daily basis and really looking into all the different things that are happening at COP and how we're responding to it. And UNDP is very pleased to be part of this effort. I'd like to acknowledge the significance of this COP30 that is being held in Belém, in Brazil, at the heart of the Amazon. It symbolizes the deep interconnection of forests, biodiversity, and climate. And I think this theme that you have chosen, which is stewardship of our living planet, that really recognizes that climate, nature, and people are inseparable. So I think we really need to look at how we're going through this planetary crisis that is bringing a planetary risk from the aspect of climate change, biodiversity loss, and land degradation. And these are not separate from development risks. So these, for UNDP, we look at it as a development risk. And for a healthy planet objective, we really need to look at integrated approaches across climate, biodiversity, and land. So I think this is a message we'd like to really reiterate, which is also coming up very much in COP30. And we can see that there are key innovations and commitments emerging, especially in relation to forest finance and nature-based solutions. So I'd like to today point out about 4 things that we've picked up that has been discussed at COP30 and see how this implies to Malaysia. So I think the first one that was very interesting, and we were expecting it, and it looks like a good thing that is coming, is the launch of the Tropical Forest Forever Facility, or the TFFF, which we see as a milestone in global environmental finance. This is a bold mechanism to value standing forests economically, and not just as carbon sinks, but as agents of resilience and biodiversity. And there's a nice big target there with $125 billion in support. So this would be very, very welcome, I think. We already seen 34 countries, 34 tropical forest countries endorsing this. And it is set up as a blended finance instrument for nature climate finance. And I guess the beauty of it is that it rewards tropical forest countries for maintaining their forests. And this is something that is badly needed to fill in the gaps where forest conservation mechanisms such as the REDD Plus and carbon markets quite focus on the rewarding emissions reductions and looking at the restoration of forests, but the lacking in rewarding those countries that are protecting their forests and have been doing it for a long time. So the importance of capitalizing this fund is that it needs to be strongly backed with technical rigor, including safeguards in ensuring indigenous participation and long-term sustainable governance. So for the TFFF, it's of course, it's very welcome in Malaysia as a country that has about 55% of its land covered under forest. And Malaysia has always been very advocating for sustainable forest management and forest protection, and we have a very wide network of protected areas. But I think we see that there will be a challenge in implementation, most likely because of the way Malaysia forests is governed. Land and forest is under the state, under subnational jurisdiction. So the decentralized forest governance and administration might become a challenge in how, if we access TFFF, it would be implemented. Also, I think it remains to see how this facility will be operationalized globally, and we do need to better understand, the eligibility and the true benefits to the country in terms of forest protection. and the fact that there is this 20% of the payments goes direct to IPLCs. So we really need to understand how would this work and what are the implications for Malaysia, noting that we have the subnational forest governance. We also would like to see it's worthwhile to look at how this complements the ecological fiscal transfers, or the EFT, which is that instrument from the federal government incentivizing the state for protecting the forest. So I think these instruments would probably work together well, but it needs to be understood how that could complement. Now, the other thing that is interesting is that we are very pleased to see aligning and accelerating of finance across climate, biodiversity, and development objectives. So we've been talking about it a lot, but I think now we have seen that in COP30, the MDBs have announced a new framework for nature financing. And so we can see that, this finance architecture is shifting. Finally, I think this is really important. And basically, we got now these tools that have been provided to establish the global standard for high quality nature finance. And so this actually acknowledges that investments in forests, mangroves, wetlands, and biodiversity conservation do contribute directly to climate adaptation and community resilience. So this is something conservationists have known for a long time. However, the mechanisms have not been there to do this. And so this is really good news for us. And for Malaysia, we really see this as, because nature-based solutions has been part of our journey all this while. We've been protecting the forest. We've been doing a lot to ensure that our forests do not get destroyed completely. And so nature-based solutions like what we have done is not just nice to have scientifically. They can deliver up to 1/3 of emissions reductions needed. And I think we have seen that, it's not just about emissions reductions, it's also going to be about climate resilience and adaptation when we do our nature-based solutions. So I think for Malaysia, this is very welcome, and we would like to look into how this can be operationalized in Malaysia and really work together with the financial institutions to come up with good nature climate financing. So the other thing that has come up is about how indigenous communities are really not just beneficiaries, but stewards of the lands and seas. So their knowledge, their access to natural resources, and their rights to the land must inform climate solutions. The location of COP30 in the Amazon lends moral and geopolitical weight. We can see truly that protecting tropical forests is not just a climate imperative, but a justice issue. So there was a side event in COP where UNEP revealed in the emission gap report that under the current situation, under business as usual, global warming is projected to reach about 2.8 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels by end of the century. This would be unprecedented, and probably it'll be hard to understand how that affects us. But surely the effects on this will be felt, especially on indigenous communities that depend on the land, where changing temperatures affect things like flowering season, fruiting season, mating season for wildlife, and then all the difference in the changes in the weather patterns, such as the occurrences of rains, when it occurs, how intense it is, and also occurrence of dry spells. So the longer the seasons are, and it will require different management schemes. We do see in Malaysia, a lot of the indigenous communities are already, the ones that are interlinked with nature, they're already quite resilient in the ways their traditional practices does make them quite resilient. But the effects are really obvious. There's already been studies that were done that shows that the communities have noticed the changing weather patterns, and this makes it unpredictable, especially for agriculture. It would also affect those who are dependent on their forest products, because then the seasons changing and the changes of the rainfall and even animal mating, actually it does have an effect. So it is a strategic time for Malaysia to look into national social policies and align that with climate justice and honor the rights for all for a healthy environment and ensure adequate means for adaptation to projected changes in weather patterns. So I think it's important for us to really analyze what are the potential changes coming in a world where we have such a change in temperature. Of course, it will be gradual, and therefore we must put in adaptive measures. But at the same time, we just need to understand and maybe connect with the indigenous people on how this would affect them and how we can really build resilience and ensure their continued stewardship of the lands despite the changing weather. So the fourth interesting thing that has come up is on the nexus between climate change and human health, and how climate change is also causing a health crisis. So we can see that this gives an opportunity for climate action to be framed in ways that deliver co-benefits for health, for people's health, and especially for vulnerable communities. Mainly, this would be senior citizens, those who are people with disabilities, and other kinds of vulnerable communities that are prone to changing weather, such as extreme heat and wetness. So at COP30, the BLM Health Action Plan was being advanced, and there's a call for greater ambition and finance for climate resilient health systems. So I think in Malaysia, we have started a discourse on planetary health, and this would be quite the opportunity to address this nexus in the national context and include some concrete actions towards ensuring Malaysians are far more aware and make actions that will where the national health system is able to respond to these emerging threats. I think it's important for us to understand what the threats are, and on one hand as individuals, but on the other hand as institutions, including our health institutions. How are we going to respond to this? What are the risks? I think some of it is already quite clear, but now we have guidance from WHO on what are the potential risks and threats and how the system needs to respond, as well as every individual. And I think this involves public health officials and also, to some extent, there is also the nexus on animal health, because then that affects us. So we know how zoonotic diseases are the main cause of a lot of our outbreaks. And I think it's important for these things to be considered together, because they're all very closely interlinked. So in looking at these aspects and how we're addressing these emerging issues and understanding, surely there would be a little bit of risks and challenges, and just like to reflect on some of this. So for example, if you're looking at the Tropical Forest Forever Facility, TFFF, sometimes when we look at something like this, of course, it's an ambitious undertaking. Then the questions would be things like, will it really deliver equitable payments? Will it truly be able to pay for forest protection and prevent further deforestation as what it has been designed to be? So getting a fair share requires strong governance, inclusion, and safeguards. We need to ensure FPIC is embedded into processes where communities are engaged, because a lot of these financing instruments has an effect on the land, right? Or at least the nature-based solutions are in the lands, and a lot of these lands are where the communities either live or have access to. So having free, prior, and informed consent is very important to be embedded. Malaysia does not have laws about this, which is not a problem, but our processes should embed it into the way we work with communities. Also, a bit of caution on this falling into the old power imbalances, where you have the donors dictating what needs to be done, but actually what really needs to be done should come from the bottoms up. The other thing is on, we do have, it's very innovative, trying to mobilize hundreds of billions for forest finance. and it's quite unprecedented, and it's really applaudable. But the long-term sustainability of such a mechanism depends on robust institution design, transparency, accountability, and the ability to address needs as they emerge. So I think this is an important thing to consider as well, that a lot of the current mechanisms are quite rigid, difficult to access, and difficult to adapt to the emerging needs. So I would also like to say that that we should start to be emphasized more on the role of subnational and non-state actors in mobilizing resources and implementation. And I think this is a message that has been coming through in COP as well. So I think the other thing is on our ability to look at things in an integrated manner, noting that there's coordination complexity. So integrating climate, biodiversity, and land agendas, it does require coordination across the multiple conventions. So we've got the CBD, the Convention on Biodiversity, the UNFCCC, and the UNCCD on degradation of lands. And this means multiple ministries need to be engaged and multiple stakeholders need to be engaged. We support this kind of integration. I think this is great that we're going in this direction, but political realities and siloed institutions may pose obstacles, and these need to be addressed. And if you throw in the private sector into this mix, it's far even more complex. So I think we just like to reflect on this fact of the complexity of the what we're undertaking, and especially if we're going to do it in an integrated manner, we've got to acknowledge that there are many players and it will be quite difficult, or at least it's challenging, but not impossible. And I think organizations such as CGM are playing a very important role to convene these spaces and make the conversations heard and put actions where words have been said. So the other thing is that, of course, we've been talking about financing, and there's a lot of talk about, the funds are needed, the resources are needed, but financing alone is not sufficient. A transformative change requires shifts in economic models, consumption patterns, and governance, including how we perceive forests as not just as carbon sinks, but as living systems that is supporting our lives and an integral part of our human well-being, and how it affects us as a planet, right? How we live. So now I'd like to just say that, for Malaysia, really, we can be a model for integrating nature-climate finance. We can pilot nature-positive investments. We've got a lot of potential where you have forest protection activities. We've got quite a few ecological corridors identified. We've got very clear and can be easily picked up as potential nature-based solutions, and looking at how we really address this nexus between nature and climate finance. And these can be informed by the COP30's outcomes and whatever else that is coming around, that is emerging from these discussions. Also, Malaysian private sector can partner in developing and co-financing nature-based solutions that align with both national and global priorities. And I would say that, a bit of a call to action from the government side. We can embed COP30 learnings into Malaysia's climate and biodiversity-related policies and action plans, and strengthen institutions for transparency and stewardship. I think we have these opportunities, and we should be cognizant of it and ensure that it comes into our emerging policies and plans, and align it with our recent NDC 3.0. As for the private sector, it'll be something where investment in nature-based solutions and community-based conservation should become more normal. Support for sustainable forestry, green finance, and really recalibrate the nature-related risks in business. And I think we are heading in that direction with the National Framework for Sustainable Reporting and how it will align to the global frameworks for sustainable reporting, and some of the, hopefully it's adaptive enough to include all the emerging decisions at global level. As to civil society, we should continue to advocate for rights-based stewardship models. No, it's in Malaysia, it's complex, it's sometimes sensitive, but I think it's inevitable that we should really advocate and promote the rights-based stewardship models for communities and the lands where they are, and to push for inclusion in governance and financing mechanisms and ensure there's equitable sharing. And as for academia, I think the academics play an important role to contribute to knowledge, innovation, and solutions, and raise public awareness on the value of ecosystems beyond just carbon. Carbon is one element. There are so many things that are coming up. So some of the other opportunities that are coming are things like biodiversity credits, and I think some of these instruments that are being looking at the financing need to also consider the emerging instruments such as biodiversity credits to ensure that we maximize and optimize the benefits coming from all these different potential instruments. So I'd like to wrap up with a few points. The stewardship of our living planet, it's not optional. Forest biodiversity and ecosystems are not just mere climate add-ons. They are foundational to climate stability, human well-being, and intergenerational equity. We depend on it. We are part of it. And we can envision a world where climate finance rewards preservation, where nature-based solutions are fully integrated into development, and where communities are central to stewardship and trusted with the living planet. And, COP30 must not just be a moment of declarations, but a turning point to implementation. And the real test will be how countries translate the promises into concrete, equitable action. And hopefully, Malaysia, we can also pick up some of this and show our commitment. And let us commit as Malaysians, as global citizens, to steward nature not as a resource to exploit, but as a living, breathing partner in our shared future. So with that, I'd like to thank you, and thank you to CGM, and thank everyone for your attention.
Thank you so much, Ms. Nosrat, for sharing those insights with us. It was really informative, and I think we have learned quite a lot just from that short session. So now with that, we would like to conclude today's program. So thank you all for joining. Thank you all for joining us on day 6 of the Malaysian Support of the COP30 event. We hope you enjoyed the sessions and the discussion. So before you leave, we would be grateful if you could complete a short post-session survey form, the one that just popped up just a few seconds ago. So Zoom poll will pop up on your screen. If it doesn't appear, simply click the poll icon at the top left of your screen. Do stay tuned for our upcoming sessions from tomorrow, November 18th to the 21st of November, where we'll be continuing to explore a diverse range of climate themes, which are all listed on the CGM website. Don't miss out on day 7, which is where the theme is known as Emerging Voices, Climate Action Across Generations, taking place at the same time tomorrow. Recording of today's session will be available soon, and if you have friends or colleagues who would like to join, registrations are still open. We look forward to seeing you again tomorrow. Thank you.